In 1952, a scientist in London took a photograph unlike anything seen before. It wasn't a photograph of a person or a place. It was a photograph of life itself, the inner structure of DNA. She called it Photo 51. It would go on to change biology forever. And for decades, almost no one would say her name when they told that story. Her name was Rosalind Franklin. Born in London in 1920 into a family that valued education deeply, from an early age, she gravitated toward science with unusual intensity. She graduated from Cambridge with a degree in natural sciences, then pursued a doctorate in physical chemistry. Franklin became an expert in a technique called X-ray crystallography. By shining X-rays through a crystallized substance, you could capture the shadow of its internal structure. She was meticulous, disciplined. She believed firmly in following the data, not jumping to conclusions before the evidence was ready to speak. In 1951, she joined King's College London to study the structure of DNA. At the time, almost nobody understood what DNA actually looked like or how it worked. The lab environment she entered was not entirely welcoming. She was one of very few women doing this kind of work, in a field still dominated by men who didn't always take her seriously. Working with her student, Raymond Gosling, Franklin spent over 60 hours carefully exposing a DNA sample to X-rays. The result was the 51st photograph in her series, Photo 51. It clearly showed a striking, cross-shaped pattern. That distinctive shape was strong evidence of a helix, a twisting spiral structure. Franklin recognized this herself and noted it carefully in her own working notes. Meanwhile, at a different university entirely, two other scientists were racing to solve the same mystery: James Watson and Francis Crick. Unlike Franklin, they worked mostly in theory, building physical models out of cardboard and metal, trying to guess the shape that would fit. At some point, Franklin's photograph, along with some of her unpublished data, made its way to Watson, shown to him by a colleague at her own institution. Franklin was not the one who showed it to him, and by most accounts, she did not know it had happened, at least not at first. Whether that single photograph was truly the missing piece, or simply one valuable clue among many, is something historians still debate today. What's certain is that Watson and Crick used insights connected to Franklin's careful work to help complete their model. In 1953, their model was published in the journal Nature. Franklin and Gosling published their own supporting paper in that very same issue, but it was Watson and Crick's names that the world would remember. Franklin herself moved on. She left DNA research behind and began groundbreaking work studying the structure of viruses, a field where her contributions were properly recognized during her lifetime. But her time was running out. In the mid-1950s, she began to feel unwell. She was eventually diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She continued working through her illness for as long as she physically could. In 1958, Rosalind Franklin died. She was only 37 years old. She never saw what would happen next. In 1962, 4 years after her death, the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA's structure was awarded to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. Franklin could not be included. The Nobel Prize has never been awarded after someone has died. Years later, Watson published a memoir describing those events, and it painted an unflattering, dismissive picture of Franklin's role and personality. That portrayal sparked decades of debate and eventually led historians to look much more carefully at what she had actually contributed. Today, most historians agree on this much. Franklin's work was essential, rigorous, and far ahead of how it was treated at the time. Exactly how much credit she deserved for Photo 51 itself is still argued among experts. But her broader contribution to understanding DNA is no longer in question. She helped capture the first real glimpse of the molecule that builds every living thing. It simply took the rest of the world far too long to say her name alongside it.